Ooh, what is going on? He's finally here, guys. We have the Week 1 power rankings for the Pokemon Premier League Season 4. And this time, as you just got to hear, I am joined by my lovely, extremely handsome co-host, Styx from the Token Minorities.
Hey, what is up, guys? And by the way, it is not handsome, it is beautiful. I am wearing a lovely red dress and pumps right now, so I feel very pretty. Just like to point that out.
I mean, back in the day, handsome and beautiful kind of went hand in hand. Like, it was used in a unisex type, manner and way.
Isn't that how you and I met, in a unisex bathroom?
This is true. This is the truth. But anyway, we'll save you guys from the stories. Maybe we'll have a separate story time video, because today we have the Week 1 power rankings, which I know a lot of people are probably excited for, because that's definitely one of the highlight videos of the week. No doubt about it if you're playing in the league. And we had a really interesting first week for the PPL to start us off. So both Styx and I's rankings are fairly similar, but they definitely have their differences. Like, not many coaches are in the same spot, but a lot of the coaches are kind of in the same area. So we'll kind of do it that way, whereas, if I go over where I put a coach, if Styx is in the vicinity, then he'll just kind of explain why he put his coach either a little higher or a little lower than I did. So we'll start from the bottom, guys.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would like to interject really quickly. I would just like to point out that my rankings are going to be very similar, if not almost exactly similar, to the league standings after Week 1. That's kind of how I like to do it. I like to take things as they start, just put them in there as the power rankings, because I think that's just kind of a good starting point, and then I move them up and down from there. So Maddie has obviously put a little more thought into it than me, but that's because he's the more sensitive guy in this relationship, and I'm just the more, pound away, just go very logical from the beginning.
Yeah, this is true. I definitely put a little more love into my rankings, but don't be fooled. Styx's rough exterior has a lot of soft layers underneath, and I think you'll see that throughout the season as the power rankings continue. So for number 12, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to say that, but you'll figure it out on your own anyway. So for number 12, we have the West Chan United, coached by the Unlawful Exile. Now, I do like his team. It's actually one of my favorites, so I didn't want to put him this low, but the reason that I did was because, he had a little bit of bad luck against him. Some of his Stone Edges were missing. The one towards the end where he missed on the Volcanion, even if it did kill, he would have lost to the Scarf Thunderous at the end anyway. But I think the reason I put him at number 12 was because I think he kind of blatantly misplayed, if you ask me, because when he set up with the awesome Rock Polish Weakness Policy Golem, which, huge props for using a set like that. That was really cool. When his opponent sent in his Scarf Thunderous T and went for Sludge Bomb, it kind of revealed that, his Thunderous was scarfed and that it could outspeed a +2 Golem, and it would force the Golem to go for Sucker Punch and just hope he didn't get a crit. So that kind of confirmed that, either it was scarfed or his opponent just made one of the most amazing bluffs ever. But, still nonetheless, it gives a really high chance of that Thunderous T being scarfed, which on the next turn, the Mega Aerodactyl, I think, should have come in and Pursuit Trapped the Thunderous, because if it's locked into Sludge Bomb, it can't do any damage anyway. And had he gotten the Arrow out of the way, not the Arrow, the Thunderous, then Arrow may have been able to sweep the rest of the team, or at least clean up the end game, because, it did miss its Stone Edge on Volcanion, but say, the Thunderous T wasn't in the back there, had that Stone Edge hit, he may have won the game. So I think that's why I put him there. Do you have anything to say about that guy, Styx?
Actually, I knew that you would like this guy. I actually do not like the team that much, because talk about top heavy.
True.
This team has 4 Pokemon with a value at 15 plus, and then not a single member of the rest of the team breaks 10. And I mean, while there are definitely people that can succeed with that type of draft, my freaking co-host is notorious for having that, I still have to be wary of that type of team, because it's predictable. And if there's one thing I've learned from watching and talking to players in draft format, it's that effective and thoughtful unpredictability is arguably the most important, apart from the obvious skill at Pokemon. And while he didn't bring 2 of his high-value Pokemon in the battle, which could kind of make up for that unpredictability, you really just saw why they were such significantly lower values, because they really just didn't have what it took to do as well. And honestly, the overall team structure and the week 1 loss just gives me too many question marks. And even though I don't have them at 12, I do have them at 11, and that's mostly just because of differential for this first week.
Yeah, those are great points. Being a top-heavy team is always, there's opportunity cost in everything you do in the draft format, but being a little top-heavy, if you don't know how to use lower-tier Pokemon really well, can definitely be, it could be a huge nuisance and a setback. But I think that overall, West Chen was a little bit out-prepared as well and outplayed in the early game, losing things like Whimsicott turn 1 to a Choice Banded Hariyama's Fire Punch. Now, that was a very good play on his opponent's part, but on the same token, I think that was something that West Chen and Unlawful Exile could have looked out for a little bit, and some of those plays here and there,
definitely.
Yeah, could have been gone a little bit of a different way. So for number 11 here, I actually have Slyro and the Pittsburgh Pyroar. Now, I just am not a huge fan of his team, as I mentioned in the Week 0 power rankings. I think that it is definitely too slow. And while it does have some fantastic Pokemon, like I said, the speed tiers are just really going to hurt it. It almost looks like a Trick Room team. When he brought the team this week and I saw the team preview and showdown when I was watching the battle, I literally thought to myself, like, this looks like one of the Trick Room teams that I would love to bring on the OU ladder. Which that doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing, but when Trick Room is one of your main forms of speed control in a draft, I think that's a little bit dangerous, to say the least. Dangerous to one's own team, because Trick Room is not a very reliable strategy when your opponent sees it coming. But anyway, getting into the game and the ranking a little bit more, I think that he played and prepped pretty well. It was just that he had a pretty tough matchup, and Fufu, his opponent, played very well. So, there probably wasn't too much he could have done differently there. I thought that he had some pretty interesting sets. The Victini was cool. But overall, I just am not a huge fan of his team, and I think that when it gets those tough matchups with teams that have better speed tiers and just things that really threaten its team, it's going to be hard to play around those.
Yeah, I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit again on the team, and on paper, I do like Pittsburgh's team. They have plenty of power on both the physical and special sides, and Sly also has plenty of defensive options as well. I just kind of feel like that's one of those teams that you put a ton of effort into. You're like, okay, I have all of my bases covered, I have every possible option covered, and it's one of those things that works on paper, but when you put it into practice, it just does not execute properly. That was kind of obvious this week as well, as despite the fact that he did get taxed out of a big threat, he really wasn't able to break Fufu's team, as he seems to just have a lot of one-ofs, like a one-of answer to physical threats, like a one-of major special attacker to break through things. It just seems like a lot of his things are one-ofs, and that being said, he does have something for every single role, but if those one-ofs get knocked out, hacked, all of that, then he's just in a lot of trouble. So, like I said, I do like this team, and if it works properly, then it definitely has the ability to take him far, but I don't like a lot of just one-ofs for each type of role.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. I think that Sly could definitely bounce back from, this loss, and like you said, he does have all the tools he needs on his team to go far. I just can't get over the fact that, like you said, number one, it is susceptible to hacks. It is susceptible to being out-prepped more easily than some others, because he does have those quote-unquote one-ofs, but at the same time, his fastest Pokemon being both Victini and Tentacruel not being a particularly offensive Pokemon, those are the two biggest things I can't get over, because that is just going to lead to some nightmares in terms of controlling the speed game. So we'll see what happens, but Styx definitely makes great points.
Tentacruel is kind of top tier.
It is if you're you, and you could do pretty much anything. But, for the normal Pokemon player, or even the good Pokemon player, it's not always as easy. So we'll move on to the next player here. We have, for number 10, I put Necrostevo and the Eterna City Enders. Now, I think that he played well, and I think he's got a cool team. I said it in the power rankings for week 0 that I think he has one of the most interesting teams, where if he's really comfortable using those Pokemon, then he can definitely have one of the best teams, because I feel like it can mesh well. It has a lot of really creative options, so if he could exploit those, he can go far. But he had a really tough matchup against, in my opinion, which may be the best draft of the entire season. One of the best drafts I think I may have ever seen, especially in this type of drafting system where there actually is, a point total and point limits restricting kind of what you could draft. So the fact that under the radar was able to draft such a threatening team is really impressive in my opinion. And the matchup was definitely tough for NecroStevo. He didn't have many checks to Rain in general. And on top of that, like I said in the power rankings for week 0, under the radar's team doesn't rely on the Rain. He has so many amazing Pokemon that could just put in so much work and kind of carry the team on their back that he really doesn't need to rely on the Rain. It could kind of just be a plan B for him, just a backup threat in his pocket that could come in and catch some off-guard teams. So all of those things combined really just kind of overpowered the Eterna City Enders, and I think they could bounce back from that because they played solidly. They did what they could do, but it just wasn't enough to topple that much of a difficult matchup and scary team. So I guess we'll see in the upcoming weeks what they could do to bounce back from that.
Yeah, and I mean, being an offensive player myself, I can't help but feel my junk tingle a little bit. Sorry guys, too much information, but you know what? I'm rolling with it when I see NecroStevo's team. I mean, it's full of offensive mons, some that can become tanks in order to counter his opponent's team, and while I really do like that, that is definitely my playstyle almost all the way, I can't help but be hesitant to rank him higher due to the fact that his entire team is very, very susceptible to being worn down. I mean, the problem with running tanks is that they usually have to rely on things like leftovers and other stuff like that, where they don't have a healing move necessarily to be able to properly wall those Pokemon to where they can get worn down very, very easily, and then eventually something can just run through their team. That was really on display as NecroStevo was worn down horribly by Volt's turn from UTR, and eventually it just came down to a match where he had a poor matchup and was worn down to the point where UTR was just able to bring home the game. So, I mean, I do like his team, but I'm very, very hesitant to rank him higher just because it can be worn down very, very easily by hazards, Volt turn, all those different types of strategies.
Yeah, it's actually a great point. I'm just kind of realizing this now, seeing that his team has very, very little reliable recovery. I think his only one may be the Golbat and the Volcarona. Volcarona, obviously, 4 times weak to rocks and susceptible to all hazards, whereas Golbat is weak to rocks as well. So hazards could really, really pressure him, and just taking chip damage here and there also really pressures him, as his only... both of his ground types are 4 times weak to something, so they can be kind of played around by Volt Switchers. So that is pretty scary, but kind of like Styx, I am also a very offensive player, and I do love to see how people could break down opposing teams offensively, and I think that NecroStevo does have the ability to do that with his team, but he really needs to make sure that he doesn't get too easily pressured by the hazards, by the chip damage, by things like that, because... otherwise, he could definitely go far, and he showed that he could play well and at least put up a pretty solid fight against one of, if not the best, solid, pure drafts in the league. So, we'll see where he can go from there. But for the meantime, we will move on to the next person on this list, who I actually put for number 9, SceptileMC, coach of the San Francisco Arcanines. Now, I'm not a huge fan of his team. He's got one of the best Dragon Fairy Steel cores, and it is just that alone is very threatening, and he has some other pretty good mons like Tangrowth. I think Mega Sableye is a pretty interesting pick for his team. I don't love it. I'm not a huge Mega Sableye fan in general, but I think it actually can work for his team. But overall, I'm not the biggest fan of it. At the same time, I do think it could be good because I know how well SceptileMC prepares and how good of a format player he is in general. But I think that one of the reasons I put him this high was because I think he outplayed his opponent. Not a good amount, but a decent amount. He did make a couple silly mistakes on his own, one of which being this didn't really affect the game very much, but he recovered on a Noivern when he Mega Evolved with his Sableye first turn, thinking that the Noivern would get, like a Hurricane or a Draco Meteor off on him, he'd recover off the damage, but he has Prankster the first turn. He kind of just completely forgot about that, and then he also kind of slipped his mind with some other sets that his opponent brought. He just didn't think of his opponent possibly bringing those things, which happens, but I've definitely seen him do better. He even said his prep wasn't the best this week, so I think it can get better, but I think he did outplay his opponent for the most part. He had some unfortunate hacks, including a burn on his Mega Sableye, which really kind of shifted the momentum into his opponent's favor. And he still had a chance towards the end. It was slim, definitely, but he still had a chance. So that just goes to show that George knows how to be in every match and not just completely get counted out once things don't really go his way. And I think that'll go a long way this season because there are so many tough opponents, and if he really does prep better like he said he's going to, then you know that no matter what team he has, he can always make it work. And yeah, I guess we'll just see if he could keep his word in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I actually have him a little bit higher. I have him as the top team that lost in week 1, and admittedly, I am not a fan of San Francisco's team from the beginning because of that damn Mega Sableye. And I just want to emphasize first that I have absolutely nothing against George at all. I think he's a great guy and a great battler. But I mean, when you have a Mega Sableye, some of my objectivity immediately goes out the window when ranking you just because that thing is straight AIDS. That being said, I do like George's team overall as it has offensive options as well as some things to take hits and set up his heavy hitters to take the win. In the battle, though, George was the recipient of some very, very unfortunate hacks in that match, which ultimately contributed to his loss. I mean, he did say that he did not prep the best and he had some little mind slips here and there, but I really can't be too harsh on him because even though a loss is still a loss, he still played very well. Like Maddie said, I do think he outplayed his opponent as well, just had minor slips here and there, and I do think he has huge potential to come back from this week 1 loss and just show what he can do in the later weeks to come.
Yeah, definitely. And same thing, you know, I don't want to be too forward about the whole Mega Sableye thing, but, you know, I voted ban on that. I want that thing completely out of the OU metagame, and even though it's not as good anymore, I just want that thing gone. Yeah, I can't stand that thing either, and I just don't think it fits his team that well. You know, Mega Sableye can actually be pretty solid in draft, and I think that not many people know how to utilize it too well because it is a difficult Pokemon to play with and support, and the fact that you have to kind of draft around it. But it seems like he kind of drafted a team and then threw Sableye on there, which I don't think is the right way to draft with Mega Sableye, but I could be proved wrong, and I would love for George to prove me wrong because, like Stick said, he is a great guy and a great battler. So we'll see what'll happen in the coming weeks. But for the next coach, I put for number 8, Shroomraver and the Parasect Germain. Now, he lost due to a crit. I don't really love his team, but I definitely think it's fairly interesting, and he showed that he knows how to use his Pokemon in a pretty versatile and intelligent way, and he played pretty well throughout the match, I thought. I really am not a huge fan of some of the top picks in his team, like Excadrill, Mega Venusaur, and Florges. Excadrill I do like, but I just don't think his team supports it the best, and Mega Venusaur I expressed in my power rankings for week 0 that is one of my least favorite, or I think most overrated Megas in the format. So I don't think that his team is fantastic, but he definitely showed that he knows how to use it, which is important, and he had a chance to win, I think, if he did not get crit by the Manaphy on his Electros, because he would have been able to knock out the Manaphy from there, and then some of his Pokemon, like Hitmontop, had a great matchup against the rest of Polymax team. So, because he lost mostly due to hacks, I, wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt because, we don't know what's going to happen in the upcoming weeks, and just to see him kind of lose one when it was out of his control, that is just kind of unfortunate, and I don't want to penalize him too much for that in the rankings. So that's why I have him there at number 8. But, I think that's definitely subject to change. If he wins, obviously he'll go up. But because I'm not a huge fan of his team, I wouldn't be too surprised to see him slip a little bit. But he definitely showed he could use it this week. So anything you have to say on him, Sticks?
Like I said before, before I started the rankings even, a lot of my order, actually almost entirely my order, is based on the differential in the league standings from week 1. So that is why I have Shroom all the way down at number 12, just because he did have the biggest differential. And albeit that was to a crit, that's just my starting point, so I apologize to Shroom personally if he feels that he should be higher. But that being said, he has one of the more interesting teams in the entire league. While some teams are rather predictable with what they can bring, Shroom really just has options up and down the lineup, which is something that I really do like. That being said, there really doesn't appear to be much inherent synergy among his mons, which really could cause some problems, and eventually did cause some problems in this Week 1 match. Now, like I said, that was to a crit, and that's what contributed to the differential being as high as it was, which directly correlated to why he is as low as he is in my rankings. But that's just a starting point for me. Somebody had to be at the bottom, and I just decided to put the person that lost 5-0, even with hacks. So, Shroom, I know you can bounce back, so prove me wrong, prove to me that you don't belong in that bottom spot, which I know you definitely can.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because his team definitely has a lot of options, but the synergy doesn't really seem to be totally there, and I just can't get over the fact that he has like 3 rapid spinners, 2 of which I just don't think really fit his team too well and are very good. Hitmontop is okay, but just after picking Excadrill, he picked that Hitmontop 4th round. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then Torkoal, I just am not a fan of that pick at all whatsoever. And some of the other ones like Misdreavus, Ninjask, I'm not really too sold on those picks either, but the rest of the team...
Shell Smash Torkoal.
Yeah, oh yes, Shell Smash Torkoal. That is a speed demon. I expect to see that in the coming weeks, and if I don't, then maybe Shroom will have to slip down the power rankings a little bit. Just saying. But now moving on to number 7, we have Shoddy and the Bayern Munich. Now, I was kind of torn on whether I should put him a little further back or leave him here, because I think that his team is really solid. Styx has something interesting. He's an interesting comparison to make about Shoddy's team when it's his turn to speak. But he's a great player, and he played, I thought, really well against Mono. I think he played pretty much as well as he could have. Maybe there were a few things here and there that he could have done a little differently to help his matchup. But I think he had a pretty kind of tough matchup against Mono's team, which is expected because Mono's draft is amazing, and he just played really well. I know I've seen him play really well in past games that I've watched of his, and I just know that he has the skill to bounce back and the team to bounce back regardless of what happened Week 1. So, yes, he took a loss to one of, if not the best teams in the league this season, but it was not that bad of a loss, even though Mono seemed to be in control for most of the game. It always seemed like Shoddy had something for what Mono brought, which was pretty impressive considering how good Mono's team is and how well Mono played. So overall, I think that Shoddy could definitely bounce back pretty soon, but he did get beat handily by Mono at the same time. Mono definitely seemed to have control for the most part, so we'll see how well he could bounce back from that, because that definitely was a pretty tough loss, but still very strong team, very strong player. I think I have pretty high hopes for him.
Oh, I definitely do as well, and like you said, I have my comparison coming up, and it was actually a little bit uncanny. When I first looked at Shoddy's draft, I immediately thought that it looked exactly like a team that Maddie's and my friend Jolt would draft. And what that means to you guys who are lucky enough not to know him is that it's a very bulky team with a bunch of recovery options and a couple of hard hitters that aren't used to clean up a game, but to simply beat things that his walls have trouble with. I mean, it's just kind of a team that I'm just like, wow, that is too bulky. I mean, yes, there is some hard hitters in there, so you can pass it as offense, but let's be real, that's not really offense. That doesn't count as offense. Anyway, going into the battle, I mean, Shoddy is a great player. I have seen him play. He has proven himself, but he just got beaten pretty much every facet of the game by Mono this week. I mean, again, Shoddy is a fantastic player, but he just was outplayed. He was out-prepped. And, I mean, I'm taking nothing away from Shoddy in his skill, but, I mean, he is where he should be after that week 1. I mean, he's a little bit higher. I mean, I put him at number 8 because, I mean, it was still a 3-0, but I know he can bounce back. I know he definitely has the team to make a run. But this week 1 was just not the way he would want to start at all, and so, unfortunately, his ranking will have to reflect that.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree with that 100%, and the joke comparison really is pretty crazy, especially because his main Pokemon here, his first round pick, is Clefable, and Shoddy is fantastic, and there's no doubt about it, but if he could use Clefable as well as Jolt is able to use Clefable, then I think we will see Shoddy really bounce back well from this tough loss, because Sticks was on point by saying, he really did lose the match in pretty much every facet. But I do think that with the team he's got, it was really strategically drafted, and it just really has solid synergy offensively and defensively overall. And the fact that he is a top player in the format means that he could definitely bounce back. But we're going to have to, wait and see, because that type of loss could just psychologically really take a lot of momentum under your sails. So with that happening, then, maybe he won't be able to bounce back as well as we think he should. But that's what we have the upcoming weeks for, because we'll be able to find out firsthand. So now moving on to number 6, I put Norwich Skitty here, because this is actually my least favorite team, but he definitely used it much better than I expected. I didn't really think that he would put up that much of a fight against George. When I looked at the team previews, I was like, oh, it looks like George has a pretty solid matchup here, and I just really don't like this team in general. And I was pretty surprised to see how well he played, and to see the fact that he won. Now, he did obviously get some hacks that allowed him to get the win, but he did win the game, and he did play well. And it's he showed me that he really knows how to use his kind of unorthodox team much better than I expected him to. So huge shout out to him, big props, because if he can continue that, then he'll definitely move up the rankings. Because I love to see a coach who could use Pokemon that are not considered to normally be that bit, huge threats and whatnot, to their fullest potential, and really just kind of band together a team of Pokemon that people wouldn't expect to just run through the league. So if he could do that, I will definitely be very impressed and love to move him up in the rankings. But because I really don't like that team that much, and to see that he did win, not solely on hacks, but definitely with the help of hacks, is why I couldn't put him any higher than number 6 for a team that did win its first game.
See, while we both have them at the same spot, I think you're just a hater, because this is easily one of the most unique drafts I've ever seen. And while nothing about the team immediately strikes me as powerful, and there doesn't appear to be any strategy necessarily, I really like the team. It seems to utilize a lot of underappreciated, not underrated, underappreciated threats that have the potential to do some major damage. The Don Fanatic really did benefit from some hacks in the match, but he was still able to bring out the win, which is, why he is at number 6. And pulling out a win is still a win no matter how you get it. So I really like the team. I want to see it do well in this league, and yeah, I'm a fan. You know what, Norwich? You have a little bias in the analysts, so sorry, but not really that sorry.
Well, I will say this, Crawdaunt is one of my favorite Pokemon, so any team with a Crawdaunt is definitely a team that I like. I just, please, Nora, prove me wrong, because I, at first glance, just could not really see that team doing too well. But you did prove me wrong week 1, but it's going to take a little more proving to move up the rankings here, especially just because some of the game had to do with hacks. If it didn't have to do with, as much hacks, then I think he could definitely be higher here. But with that being said, we will move on to number 5. And for number 5, I put Polymac and the Thunderbolt and Wanderers. Now, he's got a very threatening team. Some of the best Pokemon in the format are all on his team. He's got things like Latios, Manaphy, Zapdos, what else? Registeel, which...
named all 3 of them.
Yeah, those are some of the best, yeah. And then he's got some other really solid threats. Crocodile being a Pokemon that I've been learning is just amazing in the format. And yeah, he used his team and he played really well. I liked watching his video, because not only did he give his Pokemon WWE nicknames, but he also played each of their theme songs whenever they switched in, which I thought was a great touch, and I really appreciated that one. So yeah, a little bit of bias on my side here, but at the same time, I think that listening to his actual analysis of the battle was interesting, because I liked his thought processes. But the funny thing is that he kind of, just won on a critical hit, which I don't, the game was still early, and he won 5-0, so that means that, had he not gotten that crit, there was still a lot of game to be played. But as I mentioned earlier, some of his opponents' Pokemon had pretty good matchups against the Wanderers team, so had he not gotten that crit, things could have been a lot different. And because of that, it was hard for me to rank him much higher, because I don't know how clean of a win that was. I don't know if he really did deserve that win or not. And yeah, that's pretty much all I could say about that one, because very good team, good playing, but other than that, he may have lost if he didn't, get that luck.
Oh, there's there's no doubt that hacks really impacted the outcome of this game heavily. But I mean, honestly, a 5-0 is still a 5-0, and that's how it's going to look on the score sheet, and that's just an impressive win. I mean, if you dive more into it, you can see that, oh wait, it was to hacks. But I mean, if you look at it just very statistically, you're like, okay, that was pretty impressive, which is why I actually have Thunderbolt in at number 3. In my opinion, Thunderbolt just has a very solid team with, like Maddie said, 3 of the most powerful Pokemon in the entire draft format, as well as some very, very solid support. However, I do think that they are a bit top-heavy with those top 3 mods. I mean, that's a hell of a top 3 to have, and thus will be more predictable in terms of the Pokemon they bring. I mean, again, hacks completely determined the outcome of this game. Well, I mean, not necessarily in, like, who would have won, because we don't know because there was hacks. But it heavily influenced the score and all of that. But when it comes down to it, a 5-0 is still a 5-0 on the stat sheet, and that goes down as impressive enough to earn the 3 spot from me in this week's power rankings.
Yeah, definitely. A 5-0 is a 5-0, like you said. And if he can continue a win streak from here, then that 5-0 differential is definitely going to help him in the differential race. So, no doubt about it, Paulie Mack is definitely a coach and a team with his Wanderers to be looked out for, because it is just very scary, and he looked very good in his first game playing-wise as well. So, I'm moving on to who I have at number 4. I put the Onesie Bennett and the Birmingham Spritzy. I think that his prep was very nice in this game. He was the one who beat who I had number 12 on my power ranking list, which was Unlawful Exile on the West Chen United. I think that his opponent actually had a pretty good matchup against his team, but I think that the Spritzys out-prepared their opponents and also outplayed them, especially in the beginning, and then were able to beat a very scary team overall. I think that their team is also a little bit top-heavy. I think that they have a lot of interesting choices on their team that I just, have never really seen used too well before. Like, Lickitung is definitely one of them. Gigalith is another. I know Gigalith has some pretty bread and butter, straightforward potential and decent sets, but then Scyther, for a round 8 pick was definitely kind of interesting. But other than that, I think their team is pretty solid, and if they know how to use it well, which they definitely showed they did, they could do well this season. And just definitely looking forward to seeing how they could do in the coming weeks, because I thought this team would definitely be a solid contender this season, but I didn't think they'd be at the top of the power rankings, to be in the top 4. So it's obviously early, only week 1, but if they can continue winning like this, then they definitely will be staying in the top 4, if not even moving up. So shoutouts to them, and that's pretty much all I have to say on this game.
Well, one thing's for sure. If you want to take on this team, you better be ready for special attackers, because you are going to get bombarded by plenty of things with very, very high special stats. And normally, I don't really like teams with only one type of attacker, but I love this team because the surplus of special attackers can easily overload an opponent, and additionally, these attackers complement each other well, fulfilling all different types of roles. I mean, you have like Thundurus that can be an excellent Scarfer, arguably one of the best in the game. You have Volcanion, whose specs is just unreal. Gengar, who it was shown can run defensive, and then Megaladios, who just has a myriad of different sets. So I mean, like, they're all incredibly powerful and potent special attackers, but they all can do something a little bit different, and that was on full display, as really it just allowed Onesie Bandit to take home the win very, very convincingly. So I'm a big fan of the team. I'm a big fan of the coach and how he played his mods, and I think this team is a huge, huge threat, and it definitely needs to be watched out for, because you can't just put a special wall up against this guy. You have to have like multiple special walls, and maybe even that won't be enough. Like, you have to have a huge plan for how you're going to take on the special attackers.
I agree, because those special attackers all have really high physical attack stats too, so that is another thing that just makes them so hard to switch into, because you can't just throw out a Blissey against Volcanion when it carries, potentially superpower, or if you want to send in your Latios on Volcanion, it could potentially carry something like Explosion. Like, Volcanion is just one of them, and then he also has a Mega Latios with a ton of attack, and also Thundurus T, which also has a pretty high attack stat, and just a great move pool, all 3 of them they have to abuse those things. So That's pretty interesting, and Gengar is just a Pokemon that has so many options no matter what type of set it's running. So I think it's definitely a team that can do really well if they're played as well as they were this week. So if they are, then like I said, I think they will continue to move up the rankings, which is definitely awesome because they're already in the top 4. So moving on to number 3, I put Newcastle United, coached by Fufu2. Now this team is very scary. I did say in my week 0 power rankings that I did really like the Pokemon they have, just really, really strong Pokemon from top to bottom. But my biggest issue is that they only have 9 Pokemon, and that is just something that kind of makes them a little bit predictable, in my opinion. Makes them it makes them somewhat top heavy, but I have to say Fufu did an excellent job at not making his team too top heavy. It's all pretty balanced and just really scary through in and throughout. So he kind of came out this week and he played definitely pretty well, and was able to score a win over Slyro and the Pittsburgh Pyro and a lot of his big threats. Now, I do think he had a pretty solid matchup in this game, but he really was able to just make the safe plays for the most part and come out with the win. And with that scary of a team, I think that if he could use those Pokemon well like he did this week, then he could definitely maintain his spot or even move up, because from top to bottom, like I said, just a really, really scary team with tons of options. So looking forward to seeing what Fufu could do this season, because it seems like he's definitely in a kind of in a role now. He has been doing better towards the end of the GBA season as well, so maybe he's kind of getting back into the swing of things and getting some momentum back.
Yeah, my apologies, thought you were done. But then again, can you blame me? You ramble like no other. Good lord.
Oh my god.
It's like pillow talk. He just won't ever shut up, and I'm trying to just roll over and go to sleep. But, you know what? That's Maddie for you, and you guys will learn that soon enough. However, okay, sorry, tangent. I'm gonna get back into it. After watching Fufu in the GBA for a season and covering his games, this really just looks like a Fufu team. And don't ask me to explain why, because I can't. It's just that when I look at it, it's just what I feel like the stereotypical Fufu team would be. Again, don't know what that means. That's just how I feel. Sorry, I can't explain it. I'm bad with words. But, that's not a bad thing at all. On the contrary, I think it's a very, very cool team that has a lot of solid potential. That's just what I think someone like Fufu would use in this league. And going into the match, Fufu just played very solidly all game. And while it really wasn't particularly impressive, it was a very, very solid win. And again, the key word there is win. While it wasn't overly impressive like UTR or Mono, again, still a win, still puts him in the top half of the power rankings, and I think he is somebody that is a huge threat going into, just the season in general.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. A win is a win, and he deserved that win, I think. So that just goes to show, when a coach, really deserves a win and can win, without the things like hacks and et cetera, then that shows that they know how to get a win, which is really important in, any type of Pokemon battling. So definitely excited to see what Fufu could do in the upcoming weeks, because his team just looks awesome, and he played well this week. So if he can keep up that momentum, he will definitely be able to maintain or move up. So now for the number 1 and 2, it was interesting because both of these guys, I had ranked their teams both, the number 1 and 2 best in the week 0 power rankings. But I said in my head, you know what? I don't think that they're both going to be number 1 and 2 after week 1. I feel like one of them is going to lose, or one of them isn't going to play as well and kind of just slip down a little bit. But if they do both win, then they probably will be number 1 and 2, because their teams are just so good that they're just going to seem like some of the toughest to beat. And they did end up being numbers 1 and 2. For number 2, I put under the radar coach of the Marilan Tortterrapins, and his draft is just so unbelievably scary. I think he definitely had a good matchup this week. So with a good matchup, it's definitely a little bit harder to lose, but he went to show that his team doesn't need to rely on the rain, but rain is something that needs to be that cannot be slept on, because it is so powerful. And Kingdra just came in and cleaned up the rest of his opponent's team. And after seeing Pokemon like Mega Scizor put in a lot of work, it just goes to show that he has that type of team. Like I said before, it doesn't need to rely on the rain. It's not just a rain draft, and I think that's so huge, considering that all these Pokemon that he drafted that are amazing also benefit from the rain. It's just it's a beautiful team, in my opinion. And if he can continue to use it well, like he played pretty solid this week, if he can continue to play better and prep better and everything like that, I think that he'll be, nearly unbeatable because his team is just that good. But obviously there are amazing players in this league, so to be able to out-prep and outplay your opponents week in and week out is going to be extremely difficult. So we'll see what he could do in the coming weeks. But for now, just amazing team, played well, and showed that his team needs to be taken extremely seriously.
Okay. I'll be honest. How the hell did he manage to draft that team? I mean, that is not only one of the scariest draft format teams I've ever seen, that is easily one of the scariest OU teams I think I've seen. Like, if I saw that on the ladder, I wouldn't bat an eye at it twice just because that team just looks so freaking strong. And not only did UTR draft an excellent rain team, he also drafted a team that functions beautifully outside of it. So, I mean, that's one of these easily the scariest team in the entire league, in my opinion. And if Mono hadn't been so impressive this week, I would have to have given the spot to UTR. I mean, he played well in his game, but he did have the matchup advantage, and he just played well. I mean, he did what he was supposed to, took the advantage, ran with it, and came home with a very solid victory. So props to him on that. And he would have the number one spot if Mono didn't play, I think, the best I've actually ever seen that guy play.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that, under the radar, he got a clean 3-0, but at the same time, it was a 3-0 with a matchup advantage. So it's just like, solid win. That's kind of what we expected, but nothing really out of the ordinary to just say, wow, like he deserves the number one spot. So going on to that number one spot, as, Sticks did mention before, we both have Monotui and the Tampa Bay Luxrays. Now, this was a fantastic draft, almost as good in my opinion as Under the Radars. It possibly as good, but I think that overall Under the Radars just on paper looks to be a little bit better. But very, very good draft. But overall, I mean, he played a top player, one of the runner-ups from last season in Shadi, and he just controlled the game the entire time. He prepped really well. He definitely, he outplayed, not by a mile, but he definitely outplayed to the point where even if Shadi did make some good plays here and there, it just wasn't enough for him to catch up in the match and really regain control or change the momentum. So that is huge when playing a player as good as Shadi. And if Mono could continue with his awesome draft, I mean, he seems like the team to beat right now. I know it's early, only week 1, but that was a huge win. Played flawlessly and prepped incredibly well with just such a scary team. So because of that, I could just see Mono doing incredibly well this season and going really far. But of course it is early, but that's just why I have to put him at number 1 for the week 1 power rankings.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out we were actually saying it completely wrong. It is, according to the Google Doc anyway, it is not Mono Tui, it is Mono Kui. So yeah, sorry about that, guys. We were misinformed about one of the coaches' names. We will correct it from here on out, and again, we both apologize profusely. Anyway, on to why I have Mono ranked number 1, and really, it just comes down to one word: Abra. That's it. I mean, I feel like I don't need to explain anything else, because when you see that Abra, and you just click X. I mean, like, if you just see that he has the option to bring that, like, you have no chance. You've already lost. Okay, sorry. That was really stupid, and I probably took it much longer than I should have. And you know what? That's what got Maddie to fall in love with me in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
I actually really do like Mono's draft. I mean, it's a very solid team with a ton of different options, and once again, Mono with the Pillow Swamp. I mean, he must love that thing, and I mean, who can blame him? I love the combination of ice and ground physical stab. And Icicle Crash is honestly one of my favorite moves, if not my favorite move in the entire game. So sorry, a little bit biased there, but Mono just played very, very impressively. Was able to take on one of the best players in all of draft format and just completely outplay them this week. I mean, it wasn't like, didn't just like completely wipe the floor with him, but he did very much outplay him. So, I mean, mad props to Mono for his prep, and that's why he's number 1 in not only mine, but also Maddie's rankings for this week.
Is that why Jolt named you the Piloswine, or names his Piloswine after you because you love Ice School Crash and the Ice Ground typing?
No, I think he just does that because I'm fat.
Right. But it's okay. A little cushion for the pushing is definitely not something to complain about. I know. I mean, it definitely works when things get a little hot. Yeah. No, definitely. So because Sticks and I are starting to get a little heated up here, looks like it's time to go, and that will wrap up the Week 1 power rankings for the PPL. Now, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. We'd definitely love to see what you guys thought in the comments and everything like that. Definitely looking forward to seeing the rest of the games this week, or in the upcoming weeks, because it was definitely fun to do power rankings for the first time and do it with such a seasoned veteran with an absolutely dreamy voice that is really hard to not get turned on by, such as the one that Sticks has. It was definitely a pretty crazy experience in many different ways. So that's pretty much all I have to say here, and I will leave it to Sticks to close us out.